Alright, y'all, this here's the Ford man, coming back to you again. Well, what I got here on my pathetic table, anyway, it's a Foote Transaxle, 6-speed Transaxle. Came out of Old Faithful, which is a 1990 Craftsman 2. Originally had a 12-horse Tecumseh, but it's got a awesome 16-horse Briggs & Stratton V-twin Vanguard engine. That engine's awesome. Sometimes it puffs out a little bit of, tiny bit of, like a faint bit of black smoke. It's a gasser, but it thinks it's a diesel. Anyway, it runs pretty good though. Eventually I'll probably rebuild it. I think it's a 1996 engine. Anyway, so the reason why I got Old Faithful's Transaxle apart is because it didn't want to shift gears anymore. So it's like, oh, that's just great. I need this tractor, you know. I got one lawn right now that requires Old Faithful to mow it because my other tractors will not fit. Well, okay, I do have another Craftsman. I think it's like a 94 or 95. Anyway, it's got a 42-inch deck, 6-speed manual. I don't know if it's made by Foote or not. Foote, whatever the heck you want to call it. Either that or it's Dana, Spicer, one of them. Of course, all three of them are from the same company. But anyway. So the reason why Old Faithful's Transaxle didn't want to shift gears would be because the shifter plate here was binding up. That was pretty much one of the main reasons why it wasn't shifting. So the plate was getting stuck. I mean, it moves a lot better now. I tried to take the screws out. Let me see if I can show this. Get the axle out of the way. Input shaft out of the way. I'll get to some issues with that too here in a second. But there's these two screws right here. There's two detent balls inside this, okay? So if you're going to tear apart your Transaxle, it doesn't matter who made it, it's going to have these two detent balls. And the reason why is because whenever you move this shifter plate, it gives you a sense of feel, you know, as to what gear it's in. So corresponding with the holes on the plate, you can see that hole pretty good right there. But you know, that would be 6th gear right there, and that one's reverse. It's in neutral right now. So anyway, well, if your Transaxle is like mine, where these screws don't want to come out worth anything, and trust me, I tried. That's what that on my finger is from. Anyway, these suckers didn't want to budge at all. So I'm like, alright, fine, be that way. So, what I did was I took this quick clamp here after, you know, when I had to put it back together, but to get it apart, what I did is I just took me, I think it's a 11 mil box end wrench, and, hold on here. Oops, something fell off. Okay. Just, take the wrench, stick it on the end right there of the shifter shaft, and let's see if I can turn this. I'm not getting good leverage here. It's a pain trying to do this with one hand. Well, let me just see if I can. Let's see. Try to hold this sucker in place. Okay, that's reverse. Neutral. First. Second. Third. Fourth. Fifth. And sixth. Alright, now I'm not going to turn it the rest of the way because I already put this together. Of course, I'll probably take it apart anyway to clean it up thoroughly, to put some bentonite grease on it. That's another thing. Do not put lithium grease in these Transaxles. I did, on the shifter plate. That was before I realized, oh yeah, it doesn't use that. But that's all the grease I had at the time. I just wanted to see if it would free up the shifter plate anyway. Now, I didn't put it in any of the gear sets or anything, and I definitely will not do that. You don't want to use lithium. Definitely do not use axle grease. That stuff is not designed for a transaxle, okay? Use that stuff in the transaxle, and you're going to break down your grease a lot quicker than you normally would, and your gears will not be getting the lubrication that they need, and you'll have premature wear, and then your transaxle will be shot because you can't get parts for it anymore. Yeah, that's because Dana, Spicer, Foote, whatever you want to call them, yeah, they're all gone. Well, Dana and Spicer are still around making stuff for cars and trucks and tractors, but they don't play with lawn tractor stuff anymore. So, yeah. That's why I got lucky on these 2 washers here. See, my felt washers are, you know, just a bunch of POS. So, I mean, they're 23 years old, what do you expect? So, these are neoprene washers. They're not the original felt, but they'll work. And as you can see, they're part number 5130. And as you can also see the date on there, these things are new old stock because they don't make them anymore. I got lucky. My local shop had 2 of them in stock. Sears, I don't even think Sears could get them for me. I checked availability, and I don't think they could even order them for me. But I got lucky with a local shop. So check your local shop. You might be surprised what you might be able to find. I mean, if they've been around there for a good long while, like, I don't know, say 20 minutes. 20 minutes. No, 20 years. Like the shop I went to, they've been around for like 20, 25 years. So they have a lot of stuff, you know, stockpiled in there. Not to mention they got like 8 or 9 new old stock of bentonite grease, which, by the way, was made by Tecumseh, a.k.a. Peerless, their transaxle transmission line, which, by the way, is no longer around. So, I don't know who is currently making bentonite grease or if anyone is making that grease. So, if you come across it and you've got more than one lawn tractor with a grease transaxle, buy at least 2 tubes. They're 32-ounce tubes. 1 tube should be enough for 1 transaxle. So, if you got more than one tractor, or even if you don't, you plan on keeping your current tractor for another 10, 20 years, buy yourself another tube, because in about 10 years or so, you're going to want to change out that grease. Okay, anyway, so getting back to the shifter plate. Alright, when you turn the shifter plate the rest of the way, right now it's on the 6th gear, but when you turn it the rest of the way, do it slowly and put your fingers right there where the balls are. That way you can catch them as they start to come out. Because they are spring-loaded, and if you don't watch it, they'll go flying off into the Netherlands, and you'll never find them again, and then you'll be screwed. Because, I mean, unless you get lucky and find some either new old stock or some used ones, or, you know, or buy a used transaxle, or buy a salvaged transaxle or tractor, and, you know, just for the parts inside, you know, you can do it that way too. Otherwise, you're screwed because you're not going to get new parts. So, do not lose those detent balls, please. Okay. Alright, another little issue. Oh, the shifter forks too were kind of binding just a little bit, but that's more than likely because they're just what I call it, grease deprived or grease deficient. So, I mean, all the grease is just, it was disgusting. It was, you don't want to know. Anyway, so yeah, that was mainly the reason why Old Faithful's transaxle just didn't want to shift gears. I mean, the shifter plate was binding because it was grease deprived. The shifter forks, or not forks, keys actually, they were binding up a bit too. So it was interesting to try to shift gears in that thing too. I eventually took all the gears off and played with the keys a bit, wiped it down, put it back together, and it seems to shift. It's still a little interesting, but it shifts now. But I'm going to be tearing all those gears apart, cleaning them up thoroughly, along with the differential and axles, and cleaning them all up and re-greasing it all, so it'll be beautiful again. Well, that's if I decide to re-grease it. I'm kind of not sure what I want to do. I mean, since I've got these neoprene washers, they fit right here, right in that hole right there. It's our slot, whatever. Since I got the neoprene washers, I could convert this to a gear oil transaxle, because some of them were, instead of grease. I mean, grease is good, but gear oil is better. And the reason why is because over time the grease will be thrown away from the gears, and it won't really well, you know, come back to the gears, so to speak. Whereas gear oil will always, you know, it's thrown away from the gears, it comes right back. So, and continues to lubricate them. So really, gear oil is better for that reason right there. So since I've got the neoprene washers, I could convert this over to a gear oil if I wanted to, you know, and just take some liquid gasket sealer, you know, run it along the edge here, you know, whatever, you know, and then just put some in here in the bushings to seal off the bushings too, so that nothing comes out from there. I mean, it shouldn't, because it should be compressed with the case, but hey, extra measure, you know what I mean? So I could do that, convert this thing over to gear oil, which in the future I wouldn't have to worry about, you know, the availability of bentonite grease anymore. But I mean, I would use, if you do want to convert your transaxle over to gear oil, use 80W90. That's what I use in my old farm tractor. It's a 1947 Ford 2N, in case you didn't know. Originally Ford called for the 80W90, so that's what you can use in this too. Anyway, but also the other little issue that Old Faithful's transaxle has are the needle bearings for the input shaft. That input shaft has so much play, it's pathetic. But luckily, though, I found, which, by the way, they're not available either. There used to be a kit available that included both the input shaft, the bevel gear, or the pinion gear, I mean. Pinion, bevel gear, whatever the hell it's called. Anyway, and the bearings included all that, and the O-ring included all of that stuff, but it's no longer available either. So yeah, but luckily I found some new needle bearings at the same place that I got the neoprene washers and the bentonite grease from. They're not cheap though. They're $17.49 each. It's like, wow, and I need 2 of them. That's some expensive bearings, man. I mean, they really should have been like, you know, maybe $10 or something like that. Well, anyway, nothing I can do about that. I gotta have them. So they're not your typical needle bearings either. They're made by Tecumseh, so it's probably another reason why they're expensive. At least I think they're made by Tecumseh. But anyway, they've got some seals in them that keeps the grease inside the transaxle, so that's another reason probably why they're a little bit more, because they're not a regular bearing. So, but anyway, so yep, that's what was wrong with Old Faithful. The pulley seems really loose on the shaft, so I may have to get a new pulley. That's just great. I think it might still be available from Sears. I haven't checked, but the last time I was looking around on there, I think I saw the pulley, but I may have just seen it, and it may have, you know, didn't look at the discontinued part, you know. But anyway, also, if your brakes are pathetic and you've adjusted it as far as you possibly could on the caliper, well, the actuating arm actually, on the brake rod, if you've adjusted that nut as far as it'll possibly go and your brakes are still pathetic, well, guess what? You need new brake pucks. That would be these suckers. These are brake pucks. You can see mine. Mine are fairly new. I put them in a few years back. You can see mine are slightly worn. So they do last a good long time, but when you do need to replace them, you know, when your brakes are well, pathetic. The only issue is, no longer available. Yep, just like everything else. Well, not everything else, but anyway. So I think there might be some other transaxles that particular puck is used in as well, and I think it's still available. So it may not be shown on this particular one, but you might be able to get it from some other transaxle models. So that way you can keep your brakes. especially if you're going to be using your tractor on steep hills. So anyway, so that's what's going on with Old Faithful's transaxle. As you can see, where'd it go? Okay. Where is my? Oh, I know where it is. There it is. Bushing. Yeah, they use brass bushings. Another thing I wanted to mention is the noise. No, another thing I want to mention is this tab right here. You got to make sure that this tab, when you put the bushing in, you need to make sure that tab lines up with the notch in the case. If you do not do that, number one, the cases will not align, and if you try to torque them together, you're going to ruin them. Okay? And you'll total your transaxle. So please do not do that. We keep these old tractors running, but not if you do that. So just take the notch, put it in the hole like this, just turn it like that. You can hear it stopping there, or see it stopping, whatever. But yeah, and see if I can get some more light on this. There we go. Now you can see it. See how it fits right in there? And then the case, sits in there flush, and then the case closes against it. But if you got this sticking up in either way, number one, your gear set may or may not. If you have it sticking up like this, your gear set will fit all right, but the cases won't. But if you got it sitting down like this, then it's not going to fit right, and you'll be trying to figure out why the heck your gears don't want to go back in. So another quick reference: if you can't see the notch, well, actually you couldn't see it with the gears in, but there's a flat part on the bottom of this flange here, and that always faces down in the base of the transaxle, or in the base of the case. So that's just a little tip there. If you're putting your transaxle back together, you didn't notice that before, there you go. Save you a lot of pain and headache. Well, pain and money, actually. Because if you fry your transaxle, you either got to get a good used one or a new tractor. So, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that. Be careful of the detent balls, the notches on the bushings. The easiest way to put your drivetrain back together is put the shifter ring, pull it with your finger, hold on to the gear set, put it in the case, and then hold on to it, and then grab the shifter ring there, and pull it until you've got it in neutral. Turn over the shaft, and your gears should spin freely, and the shaft shouldn't spin. If the shaft doesn't spin, you got it in neutral, and make sure to put the shifter plate in neutral, and then you'll have no problems lining it up at all. Well, you can put it in whatever position you want. You can put it in 6th gear for crying out loud. It really doesn't matter. It's just neutral is just the easiest position, because when you go to put the transaxle back in the tractor, you'll need it in neutral anyway. So why not? Anyway, so that's just some little techniques there to put your transaxle back together, and to service it. Like I said, Make sure you use bentonite grease. Make sure the tabs and the bushings are in the notches, tabs, whatever, are in the notches corresponding with the case. Make sure your shifter ring, your shift keys, and your shifter plate are in the same position, gear position, whatever gear that may be, preferably neutral. Anyway, and what else? Oh, again, I can't stress this enough, be careful with those detent balls, because if you lose them, you're screwed. There's no going back, unless you get lucky and find them. Anyway, so, and I almost forgot to mention, when you go to put the shifter case back together, shifter plate. When you go to put the shifter plate back together, I use me some vice grip, quick grip thingies. I can slide it down or whatever. You can use whatever clamp you want. But I used a clamp here along with a socket that I put right there, and then I clamp it in place. And then what I do, because when you go to put it back together, those detent springs are spring loaded. Okay, so the shaft, once you take the snap ring out and the washer off, the washer may be a pain in the butt to get off. If it is, just take 2 flathead screwdrivers and just pry it, pry on the opposite sides, and that's how you pop that sucker off. Anyway, so the only way to get this back together without removing the detent screws, springs, and balls is to just lift this shifter plate up. It'll lift up a bit. It should pull all the way out. Mine does not want to, so I may need to play with it a little bit more. But it should just pull right out. But if it doesn't, just lift it up to where it'll clear the balls. Just put your fingers here to make sure the balls stay in place, in position on the springs, and then just move the plate over to cover the springs, and then take your clamp and clamp this sucker down to hold it in place, because otherwise there's just really no other way to do it. But anyway, it'll hold it in place and hold the shifter down so that you can get the cotter pin and washer installed. And if the washer doesn't want to go back on easy, just take a socket and whack it in place, and there you go. That's how you do that. And then install your cotter pin, and there you go. Your shifter plate's reinstalled, all without playing with these screws. Now, of course, your transaxle might have one screw, and if it does have one screw, it's just a cover plate that covers over this. They did a little design change. I don't know the years, but they did a design change, and they used a cover plate that covers these 2 screws with one screw that holds the plate in place. So, quite frankly, the individual screws are technically they're a little bit better than doing it the other way, because there's each detent ball and spring has its own screw to hold it in place, instead of one screw holding a plate in place that holds 2 screws in place. So it's twice the work for one screw. But it doesn't matter. It does all right, though. So anyway, so that is how you get your shifter plate back in place if your screws don't want to move, or if you just plain don't feel like messing with them. And make sure you put either, if it's a grease transaxle, make sure if you've got felt washers or neoprene, it doesn't matter, to put them in place. And if you're going to convert it to an oil transaxle, make sure you plug these holes right here. Now, there's no grease zerks on them. You'd think there would be. These holes right here, yeah, you leak out your oil right there, and you'll be wondering, what the heck? So, yeah, make sure you put a plug in there. Screws or whatever. Or heck, you can just screw, if you can find a small enough one, you can screw a grease zerks in there if you wanted to. Just try not to grease it. So, but yeah, I think that about covers everything. Oh, make sure you replace your input shaft O-ring, because this will keep water out of the transaxle. Of course, the bearings will do a good job of that too. But make sure you replace that O-ring, and the shifter plate or the shifter shaft does have an O-ring on it too. It's below the flat washer. So yeah, I think that about covers it. So alrighty, hopefully I'll get this transaxle put back together by the end of this week. If not, next week. I'd really like to get Old Faithful going again. And alrighty, this here's the Ford Man signing off.